Hello, this is Jackaфee, and this is my first impression or repulsive review of Manor Lords. And this is coming from the perspective of someone who doesn't play farm simulators or city builders or real-time strategy games. Or in other words, from a fucking idiot. Now, in fact, the last time I played an RTS game was probably Age of Empires 2 back in 1999. Don't say it. I fucking know I'm old. Personally, I spent about a dozen hours building a large town, and its primary purpose was the production of beer. 'Twas the tale of Lord Barley. Long may he reign! You can view how my first year went right here. So I maxed out an army, I conquered new lands, I built new settlements, and I exerted my dominance by penetrating the nearby lord without lubrication. In its core, Manor Lords is a medieval strategy game with building elements, some battles, and economic and social simulations that vividly showcases a depiction of human behavior by ruthlessly slaughtering anything in fucking sight. You start from humble beginnings and transform your ghetto village into a thriving city, overseeing resources and production chains while expanding your territory through conquest. Now, this game, although there is room for improvement and it stumbles sometimes like a fucking drunken peasant, it's evident that the game makes a sincere effort to allow players to authentically recreate medieval towns and villages, and it surpasses its competitors in achieving that objective. Now, it's very much unfinished, but what is there is good. So this game is in early access, and it's kind of remarkable that it was envisioned and developed by one single developer, Greg Steichen. I hope I'm fucking saying that right. Probably not. Now, if that doesn't make you feel like you've done completely nothing in your life, like I have, then you're absolutely right. It gained massive popularity and was wishlisted over 3 million times, making this guy a goddamn millionaire overnight. Well deserved. So the popularity of this game primarily arose because of its aesthetics. Manor Lords is a great looking city builder, and it's honestly the best in the genre. Like, all the way from its lighting to its textures to how the game's ultimately rendered. And I'm not a historian, right? But I feel like Greg's vision in capturing the late 14th century Franconia was accomplished here. But honestly, I wouldn't have any fucking clue, would I? Now I'm terrible at making settlements look good in any game. Like, I can't even put together a fucking Lego set marketed to toddlers over the age of 1 and 1.5. But Manor Lords is a refreshing change to that. You know, you can build housing plots and field boundaries without strict grid patterns, and that kind of adds to the authenticity to towns, resulting in a more realistic appearance. And it utterly makes it child-proof. Now, the user interface for construction ensured that all settlements look fantastic, which is, honestly a miracle in itself. Nevertheless, it's worth mentioning that while the housing plots and fields offer flexible placement, other buildings are still confined to, predetermined square shapes. Now, the ability to walk around in first person so I can see just how much of an asshole I am is pretty good. Now, the functionality to the first person view is extremely limited, but nevertheless, I very much enjoyed watching my own slave master up close. Now, what really stood out was actually the game's performance. Now, Manor Lords ran like a well-oiled machine. Seriously, I was hitting like 130 to 140 FPS with over a 1K population and hundreds of buildings. Now, even during epic battles, I didn't notice any slowdowns or any hiccups. So unlike many AAA video games that have been launched lately, Manor Lords doesn't buckle under the weight of your expanding beer empire. To me, from a gameplay perspective, it was extremely relaxing to play, and I would imagine this is how Valium feels like. Now, I often spend most of my time just watching, the people in my town do their work while I barked orders at them all year, all the while listening to this relaxing melodic flute that played in the background, which added to my insanity. Now, I enjoyed the gameplay loop of just building the necessities that my town required and making sure that my population had only the bare minimum it needed to survive. Now for some overall feedback, and don't yell at me. This is a personal opinion, but the biggest problem for Manor Lords for me is that it was pretty passive. I guess the main problem for me was that I felt like I wasn't even playing the game. I click one or two buttons, I waited 15 minutes, and then, I clicked one or two buttons more. And yes, I understand you can speed up time, but from what I gathered from other city builders, right, they have more complex supply chains, more decisions to make at a micro level, and just ultimately something else that keeps you more engaged. Now, Manor Lords just at this time just doesn't really have that. But at the moment, Manor Lords works best as a photo mode for gorgeous looking medieval villages that people like to share online than in my opinion an actual game yet. But maybe that's the whole fucking point of it, and to be honest, I understand its appeal. Another issue of what it does have is excessive micromanagement. There's no adequate tools to manage the population jobs. So like you're going to play around with job slots a fucking ton. And this is especially, more prevalent if you're speeding up time, and especially with how seasons change. Like having to manually take my belligerent drunken bastards from the tavern into other jobs feels like a typical Monday morning for me. Annoying, and something I wish I could not do. I also feel like this micromanagement detracts from the broader objective, right, of like gaining control over neighboring regions and establishing new villages from the ground up. Now, with each additional settlement, the level of micromanagement that is required multiplies, which is by far the biggest downfall of this game right now. Now, it's almost akin to witnessing a toddler attempting to build their first sandcastle. Adorable, but utterly inept. Now, although that's not good, I mean, it should be easily addressed by just a single developer, right? Naturally, being in early access, right, the game is expected to have some shortcomings, but right now it's painfully lacking in content. You can pretty much experience the full game in its entirety in just well over 5 hours. It's like amazing sex that just ends too early. Now, whose fault is that? The game does suffer a little bit from replayability. We get only one map on this time, and I get it. I understand that the map nodes are randomly generated. I understand that there are different difficulty levels. But the overall gameplay loop is the same. Now, the basis for village specialization is there, but it's quite minor at the moment. Now, combat does provide some satisfaction, but it can be trivial, when the sizes of the armies are relatively equal. I found that there isn't much strategy there. And and that's not what the game is entirely about, right? It was stated by Greg himself before launch. But who reads, right? One thing too is I'd like to see more activity on the map myself than just some random bandits and raiders spread across the map, across various points. I think actually seeing the opposing lord and seeing him build his own settlements, would further fuel my desire to pillage and plow. And currently, bandit raids on your village often occur off screen, so you're unable to defend your settlement. Like instead, you receive this notification that your resources have been fucking taken. But let us defend ourselves. This is America. I thought this, or Europe. And the last feedback is that trade is overpowered, right? You reach a stage where the player can just essentially run the entire settlement through trade alone, with no inherent risks. Trades become literally the preferred method sustaining the village, overshadowing the need for active management or resources of the settlements themselves. I'm sarcastic, I'm vulgar, repulsive at times, but overall, in the grand scheme of things, it's an enjoyable game. I'm glad I personally purchased it. The game delivers what was promised in early access debut. It's relaxing to play, and I easily found myself lost in its one map, and immersed in my own mad creation. It's technically sound, it's aesthetically pleasing, and it seamlessly melds, city building, right, into real-time combat. Now, don't anticipate 100 hours of content just yet, but rather appreciate the groundwork, right? And again, for this being done by one fucking person alone warrants a purchase, in my book, to support developers like this and to inspire others as well. So, similar to an STD, I can find myself coming back now and again whenever I need to relax and get the itch. But it's certainly not a game I'll spend a significant amount of time on. And that's okay. I look forward to seeing how the game grows. And probably the biggest win for me is that it introduced me to the genre again. Like, it makes me very eager and very interested to try other city builders out and other RTS games. And I think overall for the genre, that's a big W, because I'm sure I'm not the only one. That's it, Jackoffs.